Where am I today? Well, you're about to find out. This is a village with lots of history, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy looking at the fascinating buildings that we'll find here. So welcome to Norton St Philip. There's the second oldest pub in England, the oldest being the Jerusalem in Nottingham. And this area here would have originally been the marketplace. I'll tell you more about the George as we go along, and we have the Fleur de Lys on our left here. The George was originally a wool store and just a single-storey building. Accommodation was built on the top later to cater for all the people coming to the market. So it's got a long history. It goes back to the 1400s onwards. The Duke of Monmouth made his headquarters here at the pub when he was withdrawing from the Keynsham area for a battle that took place there. And he made his headquarters here so that his men could recover. It was very wet, he had men in the fields behind the pub, but unfortunately for him, on June the 27th of that year, 1685, he had to face a battle which became known as the Battle of Norton Philips. And although Monmouth won this battle on June the 27th, he later lost at the Battle of Sedgemoor. Now this pub was turned into a courtroom so that those involved in the rebellion were dealt with, and the famous Judge Jeffreys, as the sign shows us, was here, and he had 12 men executed. They were executed across the road at an area behind the Fleur de Lys. So an interesting story, a lot of history here, and we'll tell you a little bit more about the battle as we go around the village. Just take a look now as we look at the Fleur de Lys opposite, and we will walk down to the side of the pub where we find the pub car park and the beautiful view they've actually got over the countryside behind. So you'll take a look at that as we get around the corner. But look at the beautiful buildings opposite. Certainly this was a very busy area at one time. But now we're looking at the side of the George Inn. Look at that roof line up there. And there's the gardens with a view of the church. We'll take a look down there once we've been along the road towards Frome, and then we'll come back and go down the side of the pub onto that playing field. That's where Monmouth's men were all pitched during the battle period, ready. They didn't fight at that particular point, but that's where they were all pitched up. Just taking the buildings as we go along. Some of the buildings along here had been shops in the past. It was probable that some of these houses have had their frontages extended, that back in medieval times this was a wider street and the market would have extended from the marketplace down this street. There's a former shop window there by the looks of it. Yeah, beautiful old buildings on both sides of the road, so I'll keep crossing over and you just enjoy the view of the various properties as we go along. Got the Baptist chapel there. We'll cross over and take a better look at that as well. Traditional sort of frontage that you see on those chapels. And there's another chapel on Bell Hill which we can walk past later, and that's now a house. Nice little footpath down to the fields between the cottages there. And again, just give ourselves a little closer look at the chapel. Here we have the village shop, which is a cooperative shop, and a fairly new housing estate behind, which is built in a lovely style to match in with the village. This was built on the site of a former chicken processing factory. So I'll just give you a little view of some of the property around this area before we make our way back to where the George is. we're back at the George, and we're going to walk down the footpath that runs along the side of it and on into the playing fields behind and onto the church. We've now reached the gate to the playing field, and what we're going to do now is to work our way down this area. This is where Monmouth's men would have all been camped, and all these fields in this area, and there's the gardens to the George that we had a view over earlier on. Here's the church in front of us, and to the right is where the animals were pretty much kept for the annual fair. There are modern properties on there now, but we'll go and take a look around the churchyard in a moment. The church has elements dating back to the 13th and the 14th centuries, but like many churches it did undergo a major restoration in Victorian times in the 1840s. Those Victorians loved renovating their churches. When Samuel Pepys, famous for his diary of course, he visited Norton St Philip, he actually went to the church. He made a diary entry on June the 12th, 1668 regarding his visit. He said, "At Phillips Norton, as it was then known, I walked to the church and there saw a very ancient tomb of some Knight Templar, I think, and here saw the tombstone whereon there were only 2 heads cut, which the story goes, and credibly, were 2 sisters called the Fair Maids of Foscott, that had 2 bodies upward and 1 belly, and there lie buried. Here is also a very fine ring of 6 bells, and they mighty tuneable." They were the words of Pepys. It's been established that this tomb is not that of a Knight Templar, but is most likely that of a lawyer or a merchant from 1460. And the Fair Maids of Foscott, which is a village now called Foscott, are believed to be co-joined twins. Opposite the church we have the village school, which is dated 1827, and it is still a school today. So we now come out onto Church Street, which leads onto Bell Hill, and it's at the top of Bell Hill where we find the George Inn. George is at the top on the right hand side. We'll take more look at Bell Hill later on, but what we're going to do is to walk down to the bottom of the hill and then make a right hand turn, and we'll show you some interesting things as we go around the country lanes round the back of the houses here in Norton St Philip. We have a mile post first of all. So we just work our way back down now, Bell Hill. Take a look, that's Church Farmhouse. This was very agricultural, of course. The old schoolhouse. Now we're going to go to the next little gateway here, something quite interesting. This is Palleray Hall, which is in fact the village hall. Most unusually located, isn't it? But there it is, the village hall of Norton St Philip. So we now turn into Ringwell Lane, which the Norton Brook runs along here. Further down the lane, many years ago, there was indeed a mill. So obviously taking benefit of the water source to power that mill. I do believe this area is prone to flooding. Yeah, the birds are singing nicely, aren't they, as we go along here on this beautiful blue sky day. A little footbridge to cross into the garden of the house there. And as we walk along here, there's some building work going on at a property, which I know until recently has definitely been an Airbnb, but I'm not sure if that's going to continue once the building work has been completed. But as we get to that, we'll show you it's the building called the Wool Store. So I think that gives it away what it used to be, and we'll get to that any moment now. The stream disappears a little while underground. And there's the wool store for us to take a look at. These lanes were pretty good cover for Monmouth's fighting forces when they were fighting up on top of the hill. The spring runs down the side of that house, comes out there. Just walked over the Norton Brook. Just get over here and see it. There we are. So now we reach the end of Ringwell Lane. Nice little triangular area here. We have the lane towards Wellow, that way that goes towards Bath, little village of Wellow. That way is back into the village. We'll go back that way in a second. And so is this way up the top, but I'm not going to walk all the way up here. We'll come back into this lane a little bit later. But I just want to show you something up here. This area is called Lyde Green. This is now coming on to Chevers Lane, or Chevers. The locals call this Bloody Lane because it's reckoned that during the Battle of Phillips Norton that blood flowed down this lane from all those who were getting injured in the battle in 1685. Right, we'll come back this way. Now we'll return to that lane briefly when we go down one of the other lanes off Bell Hill just below the George Inn. So lovely spot. Very quiet here, got away from that traffic. So this is Lyde Green. Now fortunately the A36 takes most of the traffic away from the village. That's a very busy road. And there's that old building we've seen earlier from the back. This in fact is a 15th century dovecote. This is a farms area around here, which over the years has been added to with a few properties and renovations, as you can see. Excuse the glare, I've got the sun. And that's the Manor farmhouse. Let's give you another view of the farmhouse and the countryside. So that's Fair Close, named after, because that's where they kept the animals on that land, as I mentioned earlier. Tudor Dovecote, that's what that building is. Now come to the garage. They don't sell petrol here any longer. Used to. Sweeping view back. Church just round the corner. And now we're coming on to Bell Hill. Now we're almost back at the George Inn. See the Fleur de Lys over there in the distance. Some parish notices. I'm not sure whether they're still made, but there was handmade shoemaker there. He's featured in many magazines and a few TV programmes. So we are at the top of Bell Hill. And what we'll do now, keep the sun behind us, we'll take a walk along North Street, show you anything interesting down there as we go. Take a look at these, taking these lovely old cottages. Date of 1735 on this one, on the left here. There's an interesting feature coming up on our right in a moment. The old building certainly is. But here we are. Now this is a 14th century pump. A little bit of modern infill. Keep listening out for cars on the road. Make sure they're not coming down here. And that's a pretty old piece of timber. The old barn. So this is the end of North Street. And now we're back into Chevers Lane, or Bloody Lane as the locals call it. And we'll walk up this time to the top. And this is quite steep. Probably doesn't show up that well on the camera. This will take us to the main road going through the village from Bath towards Frome. Again, we have modern housing on the outskirts of the village on both ends, on the sort of north-south route. Here we go. Back to Chevers Lane. Traffic going from Bath direction. Now we'll walk back this way towards the George at our starting point. During the battle, Lord Feathersham's men would have been lined up on our left against Monmouth's men. And Monmouth had the cover of the hillside when required. Just imagine the thousands of men that are up here on both sides on June the 27th, 1685. Monmouth tactically wins this battle. It was a bloody one that lasted all day, and that's why the folklore is that Chever's Lane flowed with blood, and it's called Bloody Lane. Try and cross the road safely. And we get another look at the George Inn and the crossroads down there. And the house before us there, that's the old police station. Those were the times when every village had a police station. I mean, officially, this was a town at one time. It had a market. The market cross stood just in front of the George Inn and was removed over 100 years ago now. Now the name Barton actually is kind of a sheep pen, place you'd keep animals, a Barton, and so you'll see that in lots of street names around in the old towns, the old woolen towns. Now as we look back along the road towards Trowbridge, a Roman road used to cross across here. There's no signs that the Romans ever lived here, but they certainly had a road that went past this village. I hope you've enjoyed this little look around the village of Norton St Philip. It is one that is absolutely fascinating, and if you're in the area, do call in and take a look around the George Inn. You'll find that a fascinating place as well. Thanks for joining me on Roland's Travels. If you're not a subscriber yet, please do subscribe and click the notification bell to be notified every time a new video is uploaded. Thanks ever so much, take care, and I hope to see you soon.